My name is Ariana Williams, 72 years old, and a retired schoolteacher living in my modest Vermont home. Gerald, my husband of 45 years, passed away 7 years ago, leaving me financially comfortable but emotionally bereft. I have 3 adult children and 5 grandchildren who have all but forgotten I exist unless they need something. They never call, rarely visit, and seem to have written me out of their lives. That is until the day all 3 of them showed up at my door unannounced. Before I tell you what happened when I pretended not to recognize my own children, let me know where you're watching from and tap that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to see how quickly people change when they taste their own medicine. My days follow a predictable pattern now. I wake up at 6:30 every morning, a habit from my teaching days that never left me. The house is quiet as I shuffle to the kitchen in my slippers, brew a pot of coffee, and take my mug out to the porch. The Vermont mornings are crisp, especially in autumn, when the maple trees in my yard burst into shades of red and gold. This simple ritual, watching the sunrise with no one rushing me, has become one of my small joys. After breakfast, I tend to my garden, a sprawling collection of vegetables and flowers that Gerald and I planted together years ago. Keeping it alive feels like keeping a part of him with me. Sometimes my hands ache from the arthritis that has settled into my joints, but I push through. The garden doesn't care that I'm 72. It needs me, unlike my children. My afternoons are for reading books. Gerald never had time for making soup that lasts me several days, and occasionally meeting Eleanor for lunch at the small cafe downtown. Eleanor has been my friend since we both taught at Burlington Elementary together 30 years ago. She's the only one who regularly checks in on me these days. It wasn't always this way. I raised Jackson, Meredith, and Thomas in this very house, filling it with laughter, home-cooked meals, and the occasional chaos that comes with 3 active children. I remember rushing home from teaching to help with homework, staying up late to sew costumes for school plays, and somehow finding time to attend every soccer game and dance recital. Gerald worked long hours at his accounting firm, building the financial security that would eventually benefit our children more than me. Those were exhausting but fulfilling years. I thought I was building relationships that would last a lifetime. I thought my children would remember the sacrifices we made, the love we poured into their lives. I thought wrong. Gerald's heart attack was sudden and devastating. One minute we were planning our retirement trips, and the next I was planning his funeral. The children came home, of course. They cried and hugged me and promised to check in regularly. Jackson, my oldest at 50, assured me he would handle all the financial matters. Meredith, 47, promised weekly visits. Thomas, my baby at 44, swore he would call every Sunday, just like he used to during college. Their promises lasted about as long as the casseroles the neighbors brought over. 2 weeks after the funeral, they all returned to their lives, and I was left alone to sort through 45 years of marriage by myself. The phone calls became less frequent, the visits nearly non-existent. I understood they had their own lives and families, but the completeness of their disregard still shocked me. The first Christmas without Gerald was the hardest. I invited all of them to come home, just like we always did. Jackson said his wife wanted to spend the holiday with her family in Colorado. Meredith claimed her kids had a school event, though school was clearly out for winter break. Thomas simply didn't respond to my invitation at all. I sat alone at our large dining table with a tiny ham, and presents no one would open. Last Christmas wasn't any better. Not a single phone call. Not even a text message. I watched the Christmas movies Gerald and I used to enjoy together and pretended not to notice when the neighbors gave me pitying glances as they walked past with their visiting families. I tried everything to stay connected. I learned to text message and use that Facebook thing. I sent birthday cards with generous checks. I offered to visit them instead, only to be told it wasn't a good time. I left cheerful voicemails that were rarely returned. My refrigerator door became a shrine of school photos and Christmas cards that came addressed from the family rather than from my children with personal notes. Eleanor noticed my increasing sadness during our lunch dates. "Ariana, you need to stop trying so hard with those ungrateful children of yours," she told me over soup and sandwiches. "They know you're there when they need something. That's all they care about." I defended them initially. They're busy with their own families. I remember how hectic life was when the kids were young. Eleanor just gave me a look over her glasses. My David calls me every week despite having 3 teenagers and a demanding job. Being busy isn't an excuse to forget your mother exists. I maintained my dignity through it all. I didn't want to be that mother who guilts her children into a relationship. I kept my hurt to myself, channeling it into my garden and my books. Every night I wrote in my journal, pouring out the loneliness and pain I couldn't share with anyone else. Sometimes I would address entries directly to Gerald, telling him how much I missed him and how abandoned I felt. Those pages became tear-stained more often than not. "I know they love me," I wrote one evening, "but I wonder if they like me at all anymore. Do they see me as a person with feelings, or just as Mom expected to always give without needing anything in return?" The pattern became painfully predictable. Jackson, my entrepreneur son, who never quite found the success he was sure awaited him, called only when his business needed temporary loans. His latest venture was an app designed to help people find parking in busy cities. Before that, it was a specialty coffee shop that closed after 6 months. Before that, a sporting goods store that never quite took off. Each failure was never his fault, and each new idea was definitely going to be the big break. "Mom, I just need $15,000 to get through this quarter," he said during our last conversation. "The investors are right about to commit, but we need to improve our user numbers first. I'll pay you back with interest, I promise." I had heard that promise before. I had yet to see a dime returned from any of my investments in his businesses. Still, I transferred the money the next day. He thanked me with a brief text, "Got it, thanks. We'll call soon." He didn't. Meredith was more subtle in her neglect. My daughter, always the organized one, now worked as a hospital administrator while raising 3 children with her husband Paul. She would appear at my door without warning, children in tow, whenever she needed a free babysitter. "Mom, you're a lifesaver," she would say, already halfway out the door, as her kids dumped their overnight bags in my hallway. "Paul's company dinner is tonight, and our regular sitter canceled. The kids have eaten, but they might want a snack later. We'll pick them up tomorrow around noon." Tomorrow around noon often became tomorrow evening, sometimes even the day after. I adored my grandchildren, but they were often glued to their electronic devices, barely acknowledging my existence. They knew little about my life, their grandfather, or their family history. To them, I was just the emergency babysitter who made good cookies. Thomas, my youngest, had always been the sensitive one, the one I could count on for a heartfelt card or a call just to check in. That changed when he married Lindsay 3 years ago. Lindsay made it clear from the start that she wanted Thomas to focus on their new life together, not his old family ties. Suddenly, Thomas became too busy to call, too occupied to visit, and completely forgot my birthday for the first time in his adult life. The last time I heard from him was 6 months ago, when he needed Gerald's old woodworking tools for a home renovation project. He spent exactly 12 minutes in my garage collecting what he needed, declined my invitation for lunch, and promised to return the tools soon. They still haven't found their way back to me. Last Thanksgiving brought the pattern into sharp focus. I spent days preparing a traditional meal, hoping to recapture some of the family closeness we once shared. Jackson and Meredith came with their families. Thomas called that morning to say Lindsay wasn't feeling well. As I bustled around the kitchen putting final touches on the dinner, I overheard Jackson and Meredith in the living room, their voices slightly lowered, but still audible. "Have you thought about what we'll do with this place when Mom can't live here anymore?" Meredith asked. "I've been looking into assisted living facilities," Jackson replied. "Some of them are actually quite nice, and we could sell this house to pay for it. There's got to be some decent equity after all these years." "Dad's investment portfolio should still have a good amount too," Meredith added. "I know he wanted us to split everything evenly, but I think whoever takes on the responsibility of managing Mom's care should get a larger share." I stood frozen in my kitchen, turkey baster in hand, as my children discussed dividing my assets while I was still very much alive and independent. They weren't concerned about my well-being. They were planning their inheritance. The potatoes boiled over on the stove, and I used the excuse of the mess to wipe away my tears before returning to the dining room with a forced smile. Later that evening, I heard my oldest grandchild, Meredith's 16-year-old daughter Zoe, ask her cousin, "Where did Grandma teach again? Was it high school?" "I think it was elementary school," Jackson's son replied with a shrug. "Not sure. Does it matter?" 30 years of dedicated teaching, of shaping young minds and staying late to help struggling students, reduced to an uncertain detail not worth remembering. I had taught 4th grade at the same school for 3 decades, received a Teacher of the Year award, and established a reading program that the district still used. My grandchildren knew none of this. My resentment began to grow alongside my pain. I had raised my children to be thoughtful, empathetic adults. I had modeled generosity and unconditional love. Somewhere along the way, they had forgotten these lessons, or worse, decided they didn't apply to their aging mother. Eleanor noticed the change in me after Thanksgiving. During our lunch the following week, she commented on my unusual quietness. "You need to stand up for yourself, Ariana," she said firmly. "You're not a bank or a free childcare service. You're their mother, and you deserve their respect and genuine attention." "What am I supposed to do?" I asked. "Demand they love me, force them to visit. That's not how love works." "No, but you can stop enabling their selfish behavior," Eleanor replied. "Stop sending money. Stop being available at a moment's notice. Make them see you as a person with your own needs and feelings." I struggled with this advice. The maternal instinct to give selflessly runs deep, especially for a woman of my generation. We were taught that a mother's role was to support her children no matter what, to put their needs before our own always. The idea of withholding help felt almost like a betrayal of that sacred duty. Yet another part of me, perhaps the part that had been a respected teacher and equal partner in my marriage, knew that Eleanor was right. My children had grown accustomed to taking without giving, to seeing me as a resource rather than a person. I deserved better. I began seeing Dr. Patricia Williams, a therapist Eleanor recommended to help sort through my complicated feelings. Dr. Williams was a warm, insightful woman in her 50s who specialized in family relationships and elder care issues. "What you're experiencing is unfortunately common," she told me during our third session. "Adult children often don't realize how their behavior affects their aging parents. They're caught up in their own lives and may not recognize the emotional neglect until it's too late." "I don't want to alienate them," I explained. "They're all I have left." "Setting boundaries isn't about punishment," she replied gently. "It's about teaching others how to treat you. Your children need to understand that relationships require reciprocity. Your needs matter too, Ariana." Her words resonated with me, planting a seed that would eventually grow into action. I wasn't ready yet, but I was beginning to realize that allowing my children to treat me as an afterthought wasn't doing any of us any favors. Love without respect isn't really love at all. My 72nd birthday fell on a Tuesday, a beautiful spring day with clear skies and blooming daffodils in my garden. I received a generic Facebook message from Meredith posted on my timeline rather than sent privately. Nothing from Thomas or Jackson. No cards in the mail, no phone calls, no visitors. I made myself a small cake chocolate, with vanilla frosting, Gerald's favorite, that had become mine over the years. I put a single candle on it, made a wish I knew wouldn't come true, and took a picture that I didn't share with anyone. Some sadnesses are too private for social media. That evening, I wrote myself a birthday card. "Dear Mom," it read, "Happy birthday to the strongest, most loving woman I know. Thank you for everything you've done and continue to do. Your kindness and wisdom have shaped who I am. I hope you know how deeply loved and appreciated you are. All my love." I signed it Mom because that's who I was, even if my children had forgotten. I placed it prominently on my mantle, a reminder that I was worth celebrating even if no one else thought so. The phone rang at 9:30 that night. Jackson's name appeared on the caller ID, and my heart leapt with belated birthday hope. I answered quickly, smiling for the first time that day. "Jackson, hello." "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice carrying that particular tone I had come to recognize. He needed something. "How are you doing?" "I'm fine," I replied, waiting for the birthday wishes that never came. "How are you and the family?" We're good. Listen, I'm in a bit of a situation with the business. The app is taking off, but we need to hire another developer to keep up with demand. I was hoping you could help out with a loan. $15,000 should cover it for now." My throat tightened. "Today's my birthday," I said quietly. A pause. Oh, wow, I'm sorry. Happy birthday. We've been so busy with everything. I meant to call earlier." He hadn't meant to call at all, not for my birthday. I knew that. He knew that. Yet we both maintained the pretense. "So about that loan," he continued after a painfully brief birthday acknowledgement, "the opportunity is time-sensitive. We need to grab this developer before our competition does." I closed my eyes, seeing the pattern so clearly it physically hurt. "I'll have to look at my accounts," I said. "I'll let you know tomorrow." "Great, thanks, Mom." You're the best. I'll call you tomorrow then." He didn't ask how I had spent my birthday, didn't offer to take me to a belated dinner, didn't put his wife or children on the phone to wish me well. The call lasted less than 3 minutes, and I was $15,000 poorer in his eyes by the end of it. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in Gerald's old armchair looking through photo albums from when the children were young, Jackson learning to ride a bike, his face determined as Gerald ran alongside. Meredith in her first dance recital, the tutu, I had stayed up 3 nights to make perfectly fitted around her tiny waist. Thomas bringing home a wounded bird, his sensitive heart on display as we nursed it back to health together. Where had those loving, connected children gone? When had I become nothing more than a financial resource, an occasional childcare provider? The tears came freely soaking into the pages of the album until I had to close it to prevent damage. To the precious photos. The next morning, I met Eleanor for coffee, my eyes still swollen despite my attempts to reduce the puffiness with cold spoons. Not one of them remembered, I told her, stirring my untouched coffee absently. Jackson called, but only to ask for money. Eleanor's face hardened with anger on my behalf. "That's it. Enough is enough, Ariana. You cannot keep allowing them to treat you this way." "What choice do I have?" I asked, the resignation heavy in my voice. "Every choice in the world," Eleanor replied firmly. "My son went through a phase like this in his 30s. Thought he was too busy for his old mom. Do you know what I did? I stopped answering his calls for a month. When he finally showed up at my house worried, I told him exactly how his behavior made me feel. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it changed everything." "I'm not sure I could do that," I admitted. "You can and you should," she insisted. "Look at what this is doing to you. You've lost weight. You're not sleeping. Your children are literally making you ill with their neglect." She was right about the physical toll. My clothes hung looser. Dark circles had taken up permanent residence under my eyes. My doctor had expressed concern about my blood pressure at my last checkup. "They're adults," Eleanor continued. "It's time they face the consequences of their actions. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to show them the truth about themselves." Her words stayed with me as I drove to my afternoon appointment with Dr. Williams. I hadn't planned to discuss my birthday, but the fresh wound spilled out as soon as I sat down. "I think I'm ready to set some boundaries," I told her after recounting Jackson's call, "but I don't know how to make them understand how much their behavior hurts me." Dr. Williams nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes people need to experience something to truly understand it. Your children have never felt what it's like to be forgotten by someone they love and depend on." "What are you suggesting?" "What would happen if just once they experienced what you experience regularly? If they felt invisible, forgotten, unimportant to someone who should love them unconditionally?" The idea took root immediately. "You mean if I pretended not to remember them, not to know who they are?" "It would certainly make a point," she said carefully, "not as a cruel trick, but as a powerful lesson in empathy. Sometimes we need to feel something ourselves before we can understand how our actions affect others." The more I thought about it, the more the idea appealed to me. What would their faces look like if just for a brief moment they felt what I felt every day? Would they finally understand the pain of being forgotten by your own family? "I don't know if I could pull it off," I said. "They're my children. I've never been able to deny them anything." "That might be part of the problem," Dr. Williams suggested gently. "Consider this. What if the most loving thing you could do right now isn't to give them money or free childcare, but to help them become more compassionate people?" I spent that evening rehearsing in my bathroom mirror, practicing a blank, confused expression. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" I said to my reflection. "You seem familiar, but I can't quite place you." It felt strange, almost wrong to pretend not to know my own children. Yet there was something liberating about it too, a reclaiming of power I had gradually surrendered over the years. I decided I would try it the next time one of them visited or called, asking for something. I wouldn't be cruel about it, just firm. I would help them understand in the most visceral way possible what it felt like to be treated as an afterthought by someone whose love should be a certainty. As it turned out, I didn't have to wait long for the opportunity to arise. After my conversation with Dr. Williams, I made a decision about Jackson's loan request. I called him back, and for the first time said no. "I'm sorry, Jackson, but I can't lend you any more money right now," I told him, my voice steadier than I expected. What? Why not? I thought you were doing fine financially, he responded, shock evident in his tone. I am, but I've decided to be more careful with my resources, I explained. The previous loans haven't been repaid, and I need to think about my own future. He didn't take it well. The conversation ended abruptly with Jackson barely masking his irritation. I also informed Meredith that I wouldn't be available for last-minute babysitting anymore and would need at least a week's notice to plan accordingly. These small acts of self-respect felt like massive steps. I waited for the guilt to overwhelm me, but instead I felt a growing sense of peace. Dr. Williams had been right. Setting boundaries wasn't about punishing my children. It was about teaching them how relationships should work. I was taking back my dignity one small step at a time. I had no idea how completely my world would change in just a few days. Sunday morning arrived with gentle sunshine filtering through my kitchen curtains. I was enjoying my second cup of coffee and working on a crossword puzzle when an unfamiliar sound caught my attention. A car door, then another, then a third. Visitors were rare at my home, especially on Sunday mornings. I peered through the window and felt my heart skip a beat. 3 separate cars had parked in my driveway. From them emerged my 3 children, all arriving together, something that hadn't happened since Gerald's funeral. Jackson, in his typical business casual attire, looking slightly harried. Meredith in a crisp sundress, carrying what appeared to be a cake box. And Thomas, my youngest, who I hadn't seen in months, checking his phone even as he walked toward my porch. My first instinct was pure joy. Had they finally realized how much they had been neglecting me? Was this a belated birthday surprise? Had they come to reconnect as a family? They huddled briefly on the porch heads together in what looked like a strategic conversation. Through the window I could see Jackson gesturing emphatically while Meredith nodded. Thomas glanced repeatedly at his watch. Something about their body language dampened my initial happiness. This didn't look like people excited to surprise their mother with a loving visit. The doorbell rang and I composed myself before answering. Well, this is a surprise, I said, opening the door wide. All 3 of you at once. They filed in with hugs that felt perfunctory. Jackson's embrace was quick and distracted. Meredith kissed my cheek but was already looking past me into the house. Thomas gave me an awkward side hug, his phone still clutched in his other hand. Mom, you look great, Jackson, said his voice overly enthusiastic. The house looks amazing too. Have you done something different with the living room? I hadn't changed anything in the living room in 5 years. No, everything's the same, I replied, watching him carefully. Well, it looks fantastic, he insisted. You've always had such a good eye for decor. Meredith thrust the cake box toward me. We brought dessert, chocolate with vanilla frosting. Your favorite. It was Gerald's favorite that had become mine, a detail they would have known if they had been paying attention to my life at all in recent years. The fact that they had accidentally gotten it right seemed more luck than attentiveness. Thank you, I said, taking the store-bought cake. Would anyone like coffee? I'd love some, Thomas said, the first genuine response of the morning. He followed me to the kitchen while the others settled in the living room. For a brief moment, as he helped me arrange cups on a tray, I saw a flash of my thoughtful youngest son. But then his phone buzzed, and his attention immediately diverted to the screen. We gathered in the living room, an awkward family reunion filled with surface-level chatter. How was I doing? Fine. Was I keeping busy? Of course. Wasn't the weather lovely? Indeed it was. No one mentioned my recent birthday. No one asked about my garden, my friends, my interests, or my health. It was as if they were having a polite conversation with a distant acquaintance rather than their mother. After 20 minutes of this superficial exchange, Jackson cleared his throat and leaned forward, his expression shifting to what I recognized as his business pitch face. I had seen it many times over the years, usually right before he asked for money. So, Mom, we've actually been talking, the 3 of us, he began, gesturing between himself and his siblings. We're concerned about you being out here all alone. It's a big house for one person to maintain. I managed just fine, I replied, already seeing where this was going. Of course you do, Meredith jumped in smoothly. You've always been so capable, but we were thinking about the future, about making sure you're comfortable and well taken care of as you get older. Thomas finally put his phone down, seeming to realize the conversation had shifted to something important. We love you, Mom. We want what's best for you. Their concern might have touched me if I hadn't overheard them discussing my assets at Thanksgiving, if they hadn't all but forgotten my existence until this moment. If there hadn't been a calculated heir to this sudden family gathering. Jackson took a deep breath like a diver preparing to plunge. We've been looking into some investments that could really secure all our futures. A property development just outside Burlington. The returns are projected to be significant, and we thought it would be a great way to grow your money while helping us establish something we could all benefit from. I see, I said, my voice neutral. And how much would this investment require? Jackson's relief at my calm question was palpable. Well, to secure the level of involvement that would make it worthwhile, about $50,000. But it's not just throwing money away. You'd be a partial owner. This is about building family wealth that could support all of us, including your grandchildren's education. $50,000. That was what brought my 3 children to my door on a Sunday morning. Not love, not concern for my well-being, not a desire to reconnect with their mother, but $50,000 for another of Jackson's schemes, this time with his siblings as co-conspirators. The disappointment washed over me like a physical wave, starting at the top of my head and flowing down to my feet. I felt suddenly cold despite the warm spring day. In that moment, sitting in my living room surrounded by the adult children I had raised, loved, and sacrificed, for I made my decision. Dr. Williams' suggestion echoed in my mind. What would happen if just once they experienced what you experience regularly? I looked at my children's expectant faces, Jackson already mentally spending my money, Meredith calculating her share, Thomas just waiting for this obligation to be over. I set my coffee cup down carefully, arranged my features into a pleasant but confused expression, and asked the question that would change everything. I'm sorry, but who are you again? The room fell into sudden silence. Jackson's confident smile froze on his face, then slowly morphed into uncertainty. Meredith's eyes widened, darting from me to her brothers and back again. Thomas, who had been half present at best throughout the visit, was suddenly fully engaged, his phone forgotten in his lap. Mom, Jackson said, forcing a nervous laugh. Very funny. We were just talking about the investment opportunity. I maintained my confused expression, tilting my head slightly, as if trying to place them. I'm sorry you seem familiar, but I'm having trouble remembering how I know you. Are you from the church? The nervous energy in the room shifted instantly to alarm. Meredith leaned forward, her voice pitched higher than usual. Mom, it's us, your children. I'm Meredith, that's Jackson, and this is Thomas. Are you feeling okay? I looked at her with the same pleasant confusion. Children. My children are young. They still live at home. Gerald helps me with them while I'm teaching. Thomas stood abruptly, genuine fear crossing his face. Mom, Dad's been gone for 7 years. We're your adult children. I'm Thomas, your youngest. You used to call me your surprise package because I came 10 years after Meredith. That detail, something only a true family member would know, almost broke my resolve. But I thought of my 72nd birthday spent alone of the Christmas, with no calls of being discussed as a burden rather than a beloved mother. I held firm. Gerald is at work, I said calmly. He'll be home for dinner. I should start preparing it soon. Are you friends of ours? Would you like to stay? Jackson's face had lost all color. He approached me slowly, kneeling by my chair. Mom, what's the date today? Do you know where you are? It's Sunday, April 28th. I answered, giving the correct date. I'm in my home in Burlington, Vermont. I wasn't going to pretend to have lost all my faculties, just my memory of them. But you don't recognize us. Meredith's voice trembled, tears forming in her eyes. Your own children. I looked at her blankly. I'm sorry you seem like lovely people, but I don't recall meeting you before, though you do look somewhat familiar. The panic in the room was palpable now. My 3 children exchanged alarmed glances, a silent conversation passing between them. Jackson stood and motioned for the others to follow him to the kitchen. I could hear their urgent whispers, their growing distress. We need to get her to a doctor immediately, Meredith said, no longer attempting to keep her voice down. This could be a stroke or early onset dementia. She knew the date and where she is, Thomas argued. But she thinks Dad is still alive and we're kids. That's not normal memory loss. Whatever it is, it's serious, Jackson responded. I'll call Dr. Martin right now. He's still her doctor, right? I sat quietly in my living room, listening to my children panic about my health. Part of me felt guilty for causing them such distress. Another part felt vindicated that they were finally showing genuine concern, even if it took a health scare to prompt it. They returned to the living room, trying to mask their worry with strained smiles. Jackson sat beside me, taking my hand in his. "Ariana," he said, using my first name as if speaking to a confused elder, "we're going to help you. We think you might be having some memory issues, but don't worry, we're here for you." "That's very kind," I replied. "But I feel perfectly fine. A bit confused about who you are, but otherwise well." Thomas approached, pulling out his phone and showing me a photo. "Mom, look, this is from last Thanksgiving. That's you in the middle and all of us around you. Your grandchildren, too. Do you recognize anyone?" I studied the photo carefully. "That is me," I acknowledged. "But I don't recall this gathering. Is this a recent photo?" "From 6 months ago," Thomas said, his voice breaking. "We were all here in this house. You cooked a 20-pound turkey and got mad at me for being on my phone too much. Do you remember any of that?" I shook my head slowly. "I'm sorry, I don't." Meredith had begun to cry in earnest, now no longer able to contain her distress. "Mom, please, try to remember. I'm your daughter. I gave you that brooch you're wearing for your 65th birthday. You wore it to my wedding. You said it matched your mother's earrings." Another specific detail that tested my resolve. I touched the brooch absently. "It was a gift," I said vaguely. "It's one of my favorites." Jackson had stepped into the hallway to make a phone call, presumably to my doctor. I could hear the urgency in his voice, the genuine fear. Meredith sat beside me, holding my other hand, tears streaming down her face. Thomas paced the room, running his hands through his hair in a gesture so like his father it made my heart ache. As I watched my children's distress unfold, I began to see something I hadn't witnessed in years: genuine care. They weren't thinking about money now, or investments, or what they could get from me. They were thinking about me, worried about my well-being, terrified of losing their mother in a way they hadn't considered before. Jackson returned, his expression grim. "Dr. Martin wants us to take her to the emergency room right away. He's calling ahead to let them know we're coming." "I don't need a hospital," I protested mildly. "I feel perfectly well, just a bit confused about who you all are." "Mom, please," Thomas said, kneeling in front of me now. "We need to make sure you're okay. Will you go with us to see the doctor for us?" The genuine pleading in his eyes almost made me confess right then. But I needed to see this through, needed them to truly understand what it felt like to be forgotten. "You seem very concerned," I observed. "Were we close before I forgot you?" The question hit them like a physical blow. Meredith covered her mouth to stifle a sob. Thomas looked away, unable to meet my eyes. Jackson, always the leader, cleared his throat before answering. "Yes, Mom. We were very close. You were the best mother anyone could ask for." His voice caught on the words, surprising even himself with the emotion behind them. Thomas turned back, his eyes red. "You used to make me chocolate chip pancakes every Sunday morning. You called them Sunday specials. No one else was allowed to have them, just me and you, because I was your baby." Meredith wiped her tears, joining in. "You sewed my prom dress from scratch because I couldn't find one I liked in stores. You stayed up 3 nights in a row to finish it. It was the most beautiful dress anyone had ever seen. You came to every one of my baseball games," Jackson added quietly, "even when Dad couldn't make it because of work. You sat in the bleachers with a thermos of hot chocolate, even in the rain. You never missed a single game." One by one, they began sharing memories, significant moments I had thought they'd forgotten. Bedtime stories and school projects, band concerts and driving lessons, heartbreaks I had helped them through, and triumphs I had celebrated. The memories poured out of them, each one a testament to the mother I had been, the relationship we had once shared. Their voices grew more urgent, more emotional. As if by reminding me of our shared past, they could bring back the mother they suddenly realized they might lose. The irony wasn't lost on me. It had taken the threat of being forgotten to make them remember all the ways I had loved them. As they talked, huddled around me in the living room where I had nursed their childhood fevers and bandaged their skinned knees, Meredith suddenly stood and walked to the mantel. She picked up the birthday card I had written to myself. "Mom," she said, slowly reading the card. "Did you write this to yourself? For your birthday last week?" I didn't answer, watching as the realization began to dawn on her face. She turned the card toward her brothers, showing them the signature Mom. "We forgot her birthday," she whispered, horror spreading across her features. "All of us. She had to write herself a birthday card." Jackson's defensive instincts kicked in. "I called her," he protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "To ask for money," Meredith shot back. "Not to wish her happy birthday." Thomas said nothing, the shame evident in his downcast eyes and slumped shoulders. Jackson turned to me, a new suspicion forming in his expression. "Mom," he said carefully, "are you pretending not to know us? Is this some kind of test?" The moment had arrived. I looked at my 3 children, their faces etched with fear, guilt, and dawning understanding. The lesson had been delivered. It was time for truth. "It hurts, doesn't it?" I said quietly, my voice clear and steady. "Being forgotten by someone who should love you." The 3 of them stared at me, comprehension gradually replacing confusion. I was no longer pretending. My gaze was direct, my mind obviously clear. "You remember us," Jackson stated, rather than asked, his tone uncertain between relief and accusation. "Of course I remember you," I replied. "A mother doesn't forget her children even when they forget her." Meredith's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, you were pretending." "I was giving you a small taste of what my life has been like for the past several years," I explained, my calm exterior belying the emotional storm within. "Being treated as if I don't exist until someone needs something from me." Thomas sank onto the couch, running his hands through his hair again. "Jesus, Mom. We thought you were having a stroke or something. You scared the hell out of us." "And how do you think I feel?" I asked, my composure finally cracking. "Every birthday spent alone. Every Christmas without a phone call. Every time I hear from you, only when you need money, or childcare, or tools from the garage. Do you have any idea how that feels? To be visible only when you're useful." Jackson's face flushed with anger, his default response when confronted with uncomfortable truths. So this was what, some kind of sick revenge? A guilt trip? "No," I said firmly. "This was a lesson in empathy. For 10 minutes you experienced what I live with every day. The fear that the people who should love you most have forgotten you exist. The pain of realizing you're an afterthought in their busy lives. The desperation of trying to remind them that you're still here, still a person with feelings and needs." The righteous anger drained from Jackson's face, replaced by an unfamiliar expression, shame. Meredith had begun crying again, silent tears tracking mascara down her cheeks. Thomas couldn't meet my eyes at all. "None of you remembered my 72nd birthday last week." I continued, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. "Jackson, you called, but only to ask for $15,000 for your business. You barely acknowledged it was my birthday before moving on to what you needed from me." Jackson flinched at the accuracy of my words. "Meredith, you posted a generic, 'Happy Birthday, Mom' message on my Facebook wall, probably because the app reminded you. You didn't call, you didn't visit. The last time I heard from you before that was 3 weeks ago when you needed an emergency babysitter." Meredith's sobs became audible, her shoulders shaking. And Thomas, I turned to my youngest, who finally raised his eyes to mine. "I haven't heard from you in 6 months, not since you came to collect your father's tools. You promised to return them soon. You didn't even acknowledge my birthday at all." "I'm sorry," Thomas whispered, the words barely audible. And today I continued, looking at all 3 of them. "Today you all showed up together, something that hasn't happened since your father's funeral. Not because you wanted to spend time with me or because you realized how you've been neglecting me, but because you want $50,000 for some investment scheme." "It's not a scheme," Jackson protested weakly, but his heart wasn't in it. We all knew the truth. "I've spent every holiday alone for the past 3 years," I said, the words I'd been holding in for so long finally finding release. "I've watched the neighbors with their visiting families pretended not to notice their pitying glances. I've kept your childhood bedrooms ready just in case you ever wanted to stay over. I've learned how to use text messaging and Facebook just to maintain some connection with you. I've sent birthday gifts and Christmas presents, many of which weren't even acknowledged." My voice broke then, the emotion finally overwhelming my composure. "I've been treated like an ATM and a free babysitter, not a mother, not a person with feelings and needs of my own." The silence in the room was profound. For perhaps the first time in years, I had my children's complete, undivided attention. They were seeing me, really seeing me, not as a resource to be tapped, but as a human being who had been deeply hurt by their neglect. "I didn't do this to be cruel," I said, after gathering myself. "I did it because I needed you to understand." Words weren't working. Years of hints and invitations and reaching out weren't working. Sometimes you need to feel something yourself to truly comprehend it. "You could have just told us how you felt," Jackson muttered a last weak defense. "Would you have listened?" I asked simply. "Or would you have dismissed it as an elderly mother being needy and demanding? Would you have really understood the depth of the loneliness and hurt?" He had no answer to that, and we both knew why. They wouldn't have truly heard me. They hadn't been listening for years. "For just a few minutes, you felt what it's like to be forgotten by people you love," I said softly. "People whose love you've always taken for granted. How did it feel?" Terrifying, Meredith admitted, wiping her tears. "Like the ground was disappearing from under my feet." "Awful," Thomas added. "Like something precious was being stolen and I couldn't stop it." Jackson said nothing, but the rigid set of his shoulders had softened, his eyes suspiciously bright. "That's how I feel every day," I told them. "Every missed call, every forgotten birthday, every time you're too busy to visit or even send a text checking if I'm alive. That feeling you just had, I live with it constantly." "Why didn't you say something sooner?" Thomas asked, his voice small. "I shouldn't have had to," I replied simply. "You're adults. You should know that relationships require effort from both sides. That your mother is a person, not just a role that exists to serve your needs when convenient." I looked at each of them in turn, these adults, who had once been the center of my world, who I had raised to be kind, thoughtful people. "I want you to know that I'm not going to finance this investment opportunity. Not because I don't want to help you, but because that's not what any of us need right now." Jackson opened his mouth to protest, then closed it again, seeming to realize this wasn't the moment to push. "What we need is to rebuild our relationship," I continued. "Not based on what I can give you, but on mutual respect and genuine care. I will always be your mother, and I will always love you. But from now on, I expect to be treated as someone worthy of your time and attention, not just your financial requests." "We do love you, Mom," Meredith said, reaching for my hand. "We've just been so caught up in our own lives. I didn't realize how selfish we've been." "I know you love me," I acknowledged, "but love without action is just a word. Love is shown through presence, attention, respect. It's remembering birthdays and calling just to check in. It's being there for holidays and ordinary days. It's seeing the other person as fully human with needs and feelings as valid as your own." Thomas moved to sit beside me on the couch. "I've been a terrible son," he admitted. "Lindsay and I have been so focused on our new life together, I didn't think about how that was affecting you." "That's not an excuse. It's just, I didn't think." "That's exactly it," I said gently. "You didn't think about me at all, and that's what hurts the most." Jackson remained standing, always the most stubborn of my children, but I could see the conflict in his expression, pride warring with the undeniable truth of my words. "I'm not asking for daily phone calls or visits every weekend," I clarified. "I'm just asking to be part of your lives in a meaningful way. To be remembered. To be seen as a person, not just Mom, the eternal giver who never needs anything in return." The tension in the room had transformed from shock and alarm to something more reflective, more genuine. For the first time in years, we were having an honest conversation, one that acknowledged the elephant that had long occupied our family room. "So what now?" Jackson asked, the businessman in him seeking concrete next steps. "Now we start over," I said. "We rebuild what we've lost, one authentic interaction at a time. But it has to be reciprocal. I won't be taken for granted anymore." As the afternoon sun slanted through my living room windows, illuminating the dust motes in golden light, my 3 children sat with the uncomfortable truth of how they had treated me. There were no quick fixes, no easy solutions. The damage of years of neglect couldn't be repaired in an afternoon. But it was a beginning, painful and necessary, like lancing a wound to allow healing to start. The difficult conversation continued as afternoon faded into evening. The store-bought cake sat forgotten on the kitchen counter as we talked more openly than we had in years. Each of my children processed their guilt and realization in their own way. Jackson, always protective of his pride, initially tried to justify his behavior. "I've been under so much pressure with the business," he explained. "There are never enough hours in the day." "I understand being busy," I replied. "But we make time for what we value, Jackson. You find time to play golf every Saturday. You find time to go to networking events. You find time for what matters to you." His defensiveness gradually gave way to genuine remorse. "You're right," he finally admitted. "I've been selfish. I've treated you like a safety net rather than my mother. I'm sorry." Meredith moved to the kitchen, her natural response to emotional situations always being practical action. She began preparing dinner, opening my refrigerator and cabinets with the familiarity of someone who had once been at home there. "Mom, when was the last time someone cooked for you?" she asked, noticing the single portions in my refrigerator, the half-empty cereal box, the evidence of a woman who ate alone. "I cook for myself," I answered, "but it's been a while since anyone else did." As she chopped vegetables for a simple pasta dish, she peppered me with questions about my life. Real questions, not the superficial inquiries they had made earlier. How was my garden doing this year? Had I read any good books lately? Was I still meeting Eleanor for lunch? With each answer, I could see her mentally filing away details about my life. She had missed trying to reconnect with the mother she had neglected. Thomas, my sensitive son, sat quietly absorbing everything. After some time, he pulled out his phone, but instead of checking messages, he began showing me pictures I had never seen. His new house with Lindsay. Their dog, a golden retriever named Sunny. His office at the architectural firm where he worked. "I should have shared all this with you," he said softly. "I wanted to. I just got caught up in everything being new. Lindsay and I were creating our own life, and somehow I forgot that didn't mean cutting off my old one." "How is Lindsay?" I asked, genuinely interested in the daughter-in-law I barely knew. "She's good. She's been asking to get to know you better, actually. I'm the one who kept putting it off." His admission came with evident shame. "That's on me, not her." We ate dinner together, the first family meal in my home since Thanksgiving. The conversation was sometimes awkward, sometimes tense, but always real. No one mentioned investments or loans. No one checked the time or made excuses to leave early. They were present, truly present for the first time in years. As they prepared to leave, Jackson surprised me by saying, "I'll call you on Tuesday, Mom. Just to chat. No business talk, I promise." I'd like that, I replied, not entirely convinced he would follow through. Meredith hugged me tightly. "The kids have been asking about you. Would it be okay if we came by next weekend? All of us. They should know their grandmother better." "I'd love that," I said, returning her embrace. Thomas lingered after the others had said their goodbyes. "Mom, I'm really sorry. Not just for today, but for all of it. For not being the son you deserved." "You're here now," I told him. "That's what matters." They left without financial assistance, but with plans to return soon. I watched their car lights disappear down my driveway, not entirely convinced this single intervention would create lasting change. Years of patterns aren't broken in a single afternoon, no matter how emotional. But it was a start. The following week showed small but meaningful shifts. Jackson called on Tuesday as promised, a brief but pleasant conversation with no mention of his business needs. He called again on Friday, establishing a pattern I hadn't dared hope for. Meredith arrived on Saturday with her 3 children, staying for the entire day rather than dropping them off. She helped me in the garden while the kids explored the house, asking questions about family photos and mementos they had never noticed before. When they left, my oldest granddaughter, Zoe, asked if she could come back to learn how to make my apple pie, a simple request that brought tears to my eyes after they departed. Thomas and Lindsay invited me to dinner at their home the following weekend, the first such invitation I had received. Their house was modern and beautiful, so different from my traditional home, but warm in its own way. Lindsay was genuinely welcoming, confessing she had always wanted a closer relationship with me, but had followed Thomas's lead in maintaining distance. "I'm sorry for that," she said when Thomas was out of earshot. "I should have pushed harder. My own mother died when I was young, and I would have loved having a mother-in-law to connect with." "We can start now," I assured her, feeling a connection to this young woman I had barely known before. I met with Eleanor for our regular lunch the week after my children's intervention, sharing the entire story with my oldest friend. "It was a risky move," she said, impressed by my courage. Do you think it will stick, this new attentiveness? I don't know, I answered honestly. I hope so, but I'm being cautious. Old habits are hard to break. But worth breaking, she insisted. You deserve better, Ariana. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. My sessions with Dr. Williams continued, focusing now on maintaining healthy boundaries while rebuilding relationships with my children. How are you feeling about everything she asked during our most recent meeting? Hopeful but wary, I admitted. Part of me fears they'll gradually slip back into old patterns once the shock wears off. That's a reasonable concern, she acknowledged. Lasting change takes time and consistent effort from everyone. The important thing is that you've disrupted the pattern. You've made it impossible for them to continue treating you as they did without consciously choosing to do so. I feel stronger, I realized. Even if things don't change perfectly, I've changed. I won't accept being an afterthought in their lives anymore. That's the real victory, she smiled. Your children's behavior is ultimately their choice, but how you respond to it is yours. The first holiday after our confrontation was Mother's Day, a true test of whether anything had genuinely changed. I tried to keep my expectations low, remembering too many disappointed hopes in the past. To my surprise and joy, all 3 children arrived for brunch, bringing thoughtful gifts and handmade cards from the grandchildren. The conversation was sometimes strained, our new relationship still finding its footing. But they were there, present not just physically but emotionally, asking questions and actually listening to my answers. As spring turned to summer, our healing continued, imperfect but real. Some weeks were better than others. Jackson occasionally slipped into discussing his financial needs, catching himself midway with a sheepish apology. Meredith sometimes canceled plans at the last minute, though now she always called to reschedule. Thomas remained the most consistent, perhaps, because he had the most to make up for. I maintained my boundaries firmly but lovingly. When Jackson eventually asked for another loan, I declined gently but firmly. I love you, but I'm not your banker, I told him. He was disappointed but accepted my decision without the anger that would have once accompanied it. The journey wasn't easy or straightforward. There were setbacks and difficult conversations. Old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. But something fundamental had shifted in our family dynamic. My children saw me now. Really saw me as a complete person with my own needs and feelings, and I had found my voice after years of silent acquiescence. One evening in late summer, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset, I realized I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in years. The aching loneliness that had been my constant companion had subsided. I still lived alone, still spent many days in my own company, but I no longer felt forgotten. My relationship with each of my children was different now, more balanced, more authentic. We were building connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation or need. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Sometimes the greatest act of love is expecting better from those you love even when it hurts. By showing my children how their neglect affected me, I had given them the opportunity to become better people, not just better children. And in standing up for my own worth, I had become a better mother, one who taught by example that self-respect is as important as selfless giving. As I plan our upcoming family dinner, setting the table for 6 adults and 5 grandchildren, I feel cautiously optimistic about our future together. The wounds of years of neglect haven't completely healed, and perhaps they never will entirely. But healing has begun, and with it, a new chapter in our family story. Have you ever had to teach someone a difficult lesson about how they were treating you? Did it change your relationship for better or worse? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of family healing and setting healthy boundaries. Remember, it's never too late to rebuild what's broken, whether you're the one who did the breaking or the one who was broken. Thank you for listening, and until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.